What I'll do is I'll keep an eye on people that are coming in a little bit later. We've just got a couple there just joining us. And when I get people in, I'll mute them straight away, and hopefully they'll just keep their microphones off for now. We've got a 20-minute presentation from Jimmy, which will take us to about 1/2 the hour, and then we'll open up to the floor for questions and answers. For those of you who have not been on our round table before, welcome and thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate it. My name's Sam Mickelson. I work for ERG. We're a global recruitment company and people business. We provide permanent and contract recruitment services, but we also provide consultancy services as well. We are and have been for the last 6 to 12 months building up our network of senior level, I suppose, subject matter experts, and a lot of the people we work with are actually on the call today. Today we have Jimmy Hosang, and I'm really excited about this one today. So if everyone can just mute themselves for now, that'd be brilliant. And if you're not muted, I'll try and hunt you down and mute you. But if you can all mute yourself for now, then we don't get any feedback or knocking on the door and dogs going mental or screaming children, which is probably going to happen from my room, if I'm honest. I've got a dog sleeping behind me. I've got a 12-year-old bouncing on a trampoline right now, and one upstairs playing Fortnite. Jimmy is... well, I know Jimmy really well. We've known each other for about a year. We've had a couple of video chats before, and we've recorded those videos and put them on YouTube. Jimmy is an analytics professional. He's also a failed bartender, aren't you, Jimmy?
I am. Yeah, I just couldn't really hack it like right at the cutting edge, so I had to do data science instead. Yeah.
Them's the breaks. So, no, seriously, Jimmy is... an analytics professional. He's got 10+ years experience working across telecoms, retail, actually in marketing analytics, insurance, customer call center operations, catalog retail for Freeman's. So, you know, Jimmy has got a really impressive but quite a broad background in analytics. And he's been, I think the thing for Jimmy is that he's fascinated in understanding the data and the insight behind what's going on. And that's what led Jimmy to set up his own business, the Modular Analytics Company, or TMAC, as it's sort of known now to most people. You've got 2 kids, you're in Manchester, you're from Manchester, born in Salford, right opposite the Cliff training ground. So you used to be able to watch Man United train every day. Is that right, Jimmy?
Yeah, so my bedroom like backed onto Manchester United's training ground, so I got to watch Mark Hughes and Brian Robson and all those guys training. David Beckham used to lodge at the end of my grandmother's street, and then when I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, they built a big indoor training centre, and then all I got to see was a bit of grey corrugated steel. So yeah, but I still have the memories.
Very jealous, Jimmy. I remember going to the Cliff autograph hunting as a kid, and I always remember Brian Robson was an absolute gentleman, and yeah, very jealous, mate. But then they built a massive indoor training facility, so your view of the Cliff then turned into what, corrugated iron or something?
Yeah, it was pretty disappointing, especially for like an 8-year-old boy. but those are the breaks, aren't there? Those are the breaks. Just like my failed bartending career.
Well, listen, Jimmy, I'm really excited to have you on the call today. Talking about the subject matter very, very briefly. So this was kind of born a few weeks ago, where Jimmy and I had this idea to get Jimmy on the call, because I think speech analytics is something that's not really known about, to be honest. And very much I described you, and you sort of like actually didn't agree with me, as a disruptor of the analytics or text analytics market. And you said, no, I'm not a disruptor. I want to destroy speech analytics. So just explain for everyone what you mean by that, because it's quite a big statement.
Yeah, so I think when I look back over the last 10 years and having worked in speech, I've thought that it's just been such a wasted opportunity. So there's a lot of value in speech analytics and in the customer's conversation. What you can get out of it in terms of data, to a lot of companies, it's just such a rich seam of data with so much information. But I've just felt as though there's just been some challenges around it. So there's been a focus on accuracy. There's a focus on doing things that you can do anyway, like with dispositioning, and it's not really focused on the value add things. And as well as that, I've always thought that it's prohibitively expensive. And I think if you could bring down the cost of speech, you could increase the return on investments that people are getting. You could lower the barrier for entry, and you could do more interesting work and get better outcomes for lots of different segments. So for customers, for contact center agents, and also for businesses.
So Jimmy, you were explaining to me that the big players in this market are the likes of Amazon. Is that right? And they do charge, you know, a lot for this kind of service. So just explain to everyone the nuts and bolts of, if you've got a contact center, what would you have to do at the moment if you wanted to analyze your data properly, and what's the benefits of that?
So I think what always fascinated me about customer contact is it almost combines like different parts of the business. So pricing has an impact, marketing has an impact, credit risk has an impact. And then you've also got things like, you know, forecasting demand, capacity planning, and things like that. So when it came to speech, a lot of the focus has been on what are customers saying and how can we migrate that to digital channels. So how can we just create, like, you know, my account portal and things like that. However, like, I believe that people contact you for all number of reasons, and only one of them is because they've had a failed digital experience. Like, and I just don't feel as though that has been properly addressed. And then given that, like, if you're just saying why are customers contacting, I think when you're being asked to pay, you know, an extra, you know, 5 or 10% on top of your cost for speech, I think it becomes then prohibitively expensive. Whereas if you can use speech for proactive contact, or to remediate customers, or to spot things that you wouldn't have usually spotted, I think it becomes a whole different beast, and it becomes super valuable then. And so for us, it's about like lowering those barriers for entry, making it more pain-free to do speech analytics, and then giving like a license to be creative around it as well.
Okay, excellent. I love what you said earlier about the fact that you're not looking to disrupt the market. You are genuinely looking to destroy it, but build it back up again.
Yeah. So on that, it's just I think we said people who say that they're a disruptor are just using it as a buzzword, and we'd rather be known for like the stuff that we do rather than just saying things. So what we want to do is we want to kind of destroy the myth that speech costs a lot of money and isn't worth doing. And we want to lower the barrier of entry, because speech and speech transcription isn't valuable. It's what clever people do with it and how you can drive change from it that really matters. So destroying the market for us is lowering the barrier for entry, making it accessible for everybody, so that you can then experiment and play and drive better outcomes.
And this was classically illustrated with Lloyd's last week or the week before being fined something like £64 million, and they were basically unable to recognise their vulnerable customers from a mortgage perspective between 2011 and 2015. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think that article was kind of put in front of me, and I kind of shared it. And so I'm passionate about analytics and things, but what I'm really passionate about is like how just old old processes and old ways of doing things just don't really cut it in today's environment. And I'm quite passionate about customer rehabilitation and customer vulnerability and things. And I just think these, with all of the data points that we have, there's just much better ways to identify vulnerable customers and create, I don't like the word artificial intelligence, but it's augmented intelligence. Like how can people make models better, and how can models make people better, and create that virtuous circle? And you know, we've spoken about it before. There are unvirtuous circles kind of going on, and these echo chambers going on with media and things. But how can we create like positive feedback loops that actually, like, you know, can create like better outcomes, especially when it comes to, you know, those who are most vulnerable?
Yeah. All right, Jimmy. Well, listen, I think we've set the scene. I think we've talked about the challenge. I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna give you control so that you can actually start presenting, and then you've got control of the PowerPoint. I've noticed that we've skillfully made the logo, Jimmy, cover up by the video. So when we watch this back, we'll see your logo. We won't see our logo. So but listen. It's all right. Don't worry. Listen, it's absolutely fine. Right, I'm going to make you the host, and I'm going to hand over to you, Jimmy. So you are now in control. You're in the driving seat. You've got 20 slides, 20 minutes. Go for it.
This is going to be fast. So give me a second. Let me switch onto the first screen. Do I have control?
Well, you should have. You got it, Jimmy?
No.
Okay.
Tell you what, you just flick it on. Okay, there we go.
Okay. The thing behind was hidden, so I couldn't approve it. Right, you're in control, mate.
Perfect. So we've got 20 slides in 20 minutes. So this is going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour of how I think, what I think the problems have been with speech analytics, and some interesting concepts about how these can be overcome and addressed. It's going to be a bit of a mind meld because there's lots of different concepts, but I thought touching upon all of the different use cases would be more important than just going very deep on a single one. So you'll just have to bear with me on that. So around the content, we're going to talk about speech analytics. We're going to talk around why it's interesting, the problems around it, and why, and what we're doing to fix it. We're then going to look at the customer concepts. So how we can tackle things like predictive NPS, vulnerability and spend. And then we're going to look at employee types of concepts, things around like quality assurance and stress indicators and things like that. And then I've got a use case right at the end, which I thought you might find super interesting. So, just a little bit about TMAC. We're a company that specializes in making people take better decisions and make them faster. We like to say that we're an accelerator. We don't use the word agile so much, we just use the word fast. We like to do things fast, get things into a live environment so we can really see how they're behaving, and then continuously iterate and rapidly iterate and design. We work across data science, behavioral science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, and we call all of this modular analytics. Now, just to let you into a few of the other areas that TMAC operate. The first one is around speech and voice of the customer, which we're going to speak about today. So this is around accelerating customer experience. So collecting data from speech, text, social, surveying, predicting where customers are getting some kind of delight or satisfaction or dissatisfaction, and then creating alerts and remediation activity in order to drive a better experience. Oh. We also have learning and development. So this is around targeted coaching. So how do we take data and identify the needs of the individual learners or the employees, and then target those learners, employees with specific content? Oh, it just keeps jumping on, but it's all right, I'll just crack on. And then accelerating marketing effectiveness. So how we can do things around marketing, like driving customer lifetime value, matching consumers to products, and then activating campaigns across multiple different channels. So let's talk about speech analytics. The problems with speech over the last 10 years, as I previously mentioned, are very, very easy to pinpoint. There's 3 areas. It's been too costly, it's been ineffective, and it's been slow. The average cost per hour for transcription is £1, which is far too costly for most businesses to enter. And that's not included all of the professional services and training of the models. It's been ineffective, so it's told people what they already know. It's descriptive analytics, but at high cost. And it's very, very expensive. And therefore, it's made the expense kind of even worse. And then it's been slow. So the deployments have been very, very slow. It's taken 12 to 18 months to get value from the product, if any. And what's then happened because of all of this is the industry now has a very bad reputation. Probably between 50 to 75% of the people that I speak to have been in an organization where they've had a poor experience with speech analytics. And now I feel as though that it's up to me and people who are passionate about speech analytics to drive to win those people round and to start driving some value. So this is how TMAC solves the problem. It's low cost, so to lower the barrier for entry.
Put it down here, LG.
So we're driving down the cost. I can't tell you all the ways in which we do this, because if I did, I'd have to kill you. But we believe that our transcription method is 80% cheaper than our competitors. What? It's high value. So instead of predicting just through descriptive analytics, we want to do predictive and prescriptive analytics off the back of the call, and it's fast. So we believe that we're 5 times faster than our competitors when it comes to processing. Now, the cost and the speed are difficult things, but we're going to concentrate today on the high value element. And if you guys have speech already deployed in your businesses, I'm going to give you some ideas about how you could maybe use them to do some more interesting things than what you might be doing. So let's discuss some of these concepts. First of all, we'll concentrate on the customer. So the first one we're going to do is I'm just going to talk you through how we predict NPS using speech analytics. The challenge that you have in every business customer surveys is that from 100% of the people that contact you, only around 10 to 20% actually give you feedback. The challenge there is that you're always working on very, very small samples, and therefore...
Sorry, guys, can everyone mute themselves? Sorry, I had to take control there, Jimmy. I do apologise. Can everyone just make sure that you're on mute, please, because we can just get some feedback. Thank you.
Cool. So only 20% of people provide feedback, and that leads to very, very small sample sizes. What we do at TMAC and what you guys can do is you can start to build predictive models based on the people who do give you feedback, based off the keywords that they use, and based off the acoustics, like things like talk over or silence time, in order to get to 100%. What that leaves us with is, of 100% of your customers contacted, you have 100% view of what their predicted NPS or CSAT would have been. This is highly valuable because only a small percentage of your customers that are annoyed at you actually give you feedback. I was on LinkedIn the other day, and a post came up from a guy called James Dodkins, who talks about customer experience, and he said only 6% of customers that are annoyed actually provide feedback. This was actually borne out within our predictive analytics, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. But it's amazing. It opens up a whole range of things, because you can then target customers who you would never actually known would have been annoyed. So just moving on to the next slide. So here are some other use cases that you can use when it comes to predicting customer behavior. You can predict spend off speech patterns. So this is highly valuable, because in a lot of instances, NPS is only a proxy for how much customers are going to spend with you and customer loyalty. So why not remove the gap and try and predict future spend and basket activity by using speech? We can use fraud. Fraudsters often use similar speech patterns and keywords and scripts in order to get information, like phishing scams and things. So we can use speech for that, whilst also looking at stress indicators in people's voices. And as I mentioned before, vulnerability. This is a really big one for me. I don't believe that a lot of financial services companies and utility companies, number one, are dealing with vulnerable customers in a ethical manner, but also I think it's difficult for them to do that using existing methods. And I think there's lots of opportunity that we can get at to create much better vulnerability indicators. Simon's asked the question, what are you defining as vulnerable? I'll pick that up very quickly. So it's a range of different vulnerabilities. We're currently doing analytics on so financial vulnerability, psychological vulnerability. We're also looking at kind of medical vulnerabilities as well, to see how those could be picked up. And then at the other side of it, it's around empathy and understanding and compassion from a contact center agent's point of view. What we've seen in early kind of research is it's a combination between the vulnerability of the customer not being very, very clear, and then the engagement of the contact center agent and not listening for the cues. And it's very difficult, and sometimes it's subtle. So there's a range of different things, and it's almost like trying to tackle it from two sides. A very simple view, we're looking at just vulnerability in the round, but I think then you can start to break it down into lots of different subcategories. Hope that answered the question, and I'll pick it up any more in the Q&A afterwards.
Thanks, Jimmy.
This is a case study that I won't dwell too much on, but it bears into the insight that we've seen on NPS and the insight that we've seen on that I've got from LinkedIn from James. So what you see is that we built a predictive model for complaints. That was based on a call coming in today and a complaint coming in tomorrow and 7 days in the future. It was done because we started to see within the retailer that we were working for a high volume of complaints, and we were trying to find like early indicators that we could act against. When we built the model, we got a 75% detection rate within the top 20% of contacts. We took some remediation activity, which led to a 25% complaint reduction. But again, what this uncovered was there was a lot of false positives. There was a lot of people who were saying were likely to complain, but that hadn't complained. When we did call listening on these types of contacts, we actually thought these customers had a very real reason why they could have complained. And that's very, very poor customer experience that is actually hidden by us not being across all of the data points. And so I think there's a long way to go with this, and there's much more value add that we can do once we start to automate like remediation processes and how we can triage customers that might not have had the experience that they should have. Now we're going to go on to some concepts around employees. So in quality and compliance, this is the normal process. So 100% of your calls are recorded, especially in financial services, but your QA team is small and they can only listen to a small amount of contacts every month. Usually a QA analyst will attempt to listen to around 2 to 5 calls per agent per month. And then from those markings, they will then track those failures from a QA and performance management point of view. However, less than 1% of calls are actually listened to for QA, and that represents a huge problem. As we spoke about earlier in some reference, like Lloyd's, I know for a fact that Lloyd's QA lots and lots of their contacts, like as many as they can, but that still didn't stop them from having some gaps in terms of identification and having some gaps just in overall capacity of what human beings can do when they're checking calls. So speech analytics has long been referenced as a way of solving this problem, but it has failed. And it's failed mainly because of this reason. The expectation is on the left-hand side about how calls are transcribed. And the expectation is that calls are perfectly transcribed and people speak in a very set, linear manner, almost like a script, and it goes from one question to another. The reality is actually the right-hand side. What you have is you have background noise, you have dogs barking, you have kids on trampolines, you have people coughing, people like me who forget what they're saying halfway through a sentence and have to go back, loop back around. You have very, very strong accents. I won't mention any names, but Glaswegians in particular, like it's quite tricky to transcribe. And then you've got mistranscription, so saying things like phrase and fries, or minor and mirroring or mirroring. And so when you're building speech categories, it's really difficult, and you've got to like get speech teams. I've known companies to have, 10, 12, 15 speech analysts trying to think of all the different permutations to tackle this problem. But actually, there are some simple fixes. So one of the simple fixes is using the predictive model. So instead of trying to pick out the keywords and phrases, use the fact that you have a lot of data that says whether historic contacts had passed or failed QA. You can then build predictive models that say the likelihood that a call passed or failed quality assurance. Rather than a binary 1 or 0, you then get a likelihood between 0 and 100%, and that can then be used to triage different types of calls in different types of ways. But the interesting thing there is you can then say that 100% of your contacts are quality assured by a machine. This is then pushed to a quality assurance analyst to then manually listen to, and when the quality assurance analyst listen to them, they can then confirm whether or not the machine was correct or incorrect, which will then create a virtuous feedback loop and what we like to call augmented intelligence. This type of predictive and probabilistic modeling can also be used in a few other different ways. One is around complaints, the likelihood that that an agent has generated a complaint rather than a customer, coming in from a customer point of view. Script adherence, so we can start to look at the probability that an agent delivered a script in the proper manner. This is important when it comes to FCA guidelines and things like that, where the customer needs to understand like what is being said to them, and there's a tremendous amount of rigor from the authorities about it. And then another interesting one is around measuring your agent stress levels. So a lot of things we talk about around the customer, but what about the agent sentiment? What about the agent stress? And is the agent giving off indicators that they are lacking empathy, they are stressed, and maybe they are likely to be absent, sick, or maybe even a trite because of the conditions? I've also put together a use case that I believe is quite interesting. This is around COVID-19 and how I believe this type of agent and customer analytics can be used to look at the differences between working in an office-based environment and working in a home-based environment. Working in an office-based environment, people have tight spans of control. Like you've got team leaders, you've got managers walking around the floor, and the people are being observed in what they're doing. What about taking that data that was created in Q1 this year, and then creating scores against all of your calls for your home-based workers? Because your home-based workers have other things. You have your TV, you've got your broadband that maybe cuts out just a bit like mine. You've got more noise and more distractions potentially, although I've been on customer call centers before and they're pretty noisy affairs. And you can create a database of contact that you believe has had a higher or a higher risk of issues. And I think being able to get in front of the curve for this is really important. I'm an optimist. I don't believe in in being negative about things, but 3 months ago we sent a load of guys off kind of into the wilderness with laptops and PCs, and they've not had the care and attention that they might have. You've seen articles where there's a lot of fraud going around. There's more difficulty concentrating whilst at home and more distractions. And I think it's worthwhile companies trying to focus on that, doing some analysis on the differences between home working and office working. As well, there's huge amounts of benefits if you can identify a population of agents who have high quality working from home, because that means that you can reduce the footprint of your buildings, and you can go wider when it comes to your contact center recruitment policy and recruit people all over the UK or potentially globally to satisfy the demands of your customers. And then I've got one more idea that may be good or may not, but this is something that we're experimenting right now. Lots of our customers come from customer contact, and are looking for ways to improve efficiencies or increase value through upsell, cross-sell, things like that within a customer contact environment. But we think that there's a really interesting play for speech analytics for marketing. For this, what we are experimenting with is using keyword analysis to look at customer conversations and the way your customers describe your services and product. So in this example, what we're saying is that a customer's called in and saying, I'm looking to buy life insurance to protect my wife and kids in case I get unwell, and I need help making the decision. So if I could have made the decision on my own, I'd have just done it online. I'm calling you up because I need some help. This can be used to plug directly into Google AdWords and other things like that to improve your search capabilities, and can also be used to be pushed back into your marketing campaigns. So the idea here is that whereas on the left-hand side, you may have done a Facebook post advert that said, buy life insurance from us today. On the right-hand side, you'll say, do you need help making the correct decision? Call us today to protect your family in case you get unwell. And then you could use an image of a single person. You'd maybe use an image with a family with the two kids that was sent in the contact. So I think that's quite an interesting use case, and it gives speech a different angle. It's not always just about operational effectiveness, but it can also make your marketing more effective as well. And so I don't know how I did for time. Was I over massively?
No, you're brilliant, Jimmy. That was absolutely spot on, mate. Really appreciate it. I want to pick up on a couple of things first before we go out to the floor. But it seems like this, I mean, we've talked about this. It's not just about consumer needs. It's customer lifetime value. It's learning and development. That sort of vulnerability piece that we talked about, the root causes of employee stress, customer sentiment. There's so much to kind of, where do you start, Jimmy? And where do you think your sweet spot is for the next sort of 6 to 12 months?
Well, you know me, Sam. I like to kind of go a bit all over the place and then see what works. No, I think where we're seeing, I think where my focus is, like a bit maniacally at the moment, is around vulnerability first of all, and identifying the root causes of vulnerability, and that doesn't need to just use speech. I think speech is a good one for it, but we could use other things like, the debt balance of customers and things. But I think the speech patterns, if you look at the psychology behind what people say and do, I think are very, very important. And I think being able for as an agent, being able to pick up on those cues and those clues, I think's really key. And another one is around quality assurance. So, and I think that it kind of feeds into the vulnerability conversation. So, vulnerability and being able to be compassionate and understand when somebody's vulnerable is one thing, but there's also other quality indicators where companies, I believe, are exposing themselves, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault at all. You can train people scripts, but naturally, as people become more confident and competent at the job, they become a little bit more lax. They become a bit lazy. They might not be as tight on the wording, things like that. So I think vulnerability and quality are the ones that I really want to focus on.
Lovely, that, Jimmy. I really appreciate you giving us the time today, and that's been really interesting. I've learned a lot. I'm gonna start putting it out to the floor now. So we've got quite a few attendees today, and I know we've got a couple of people that have got some experience in this area. I think a few of your contacts, Jimmy, have sort of joined us today as well. Who would like to go first? If you want to kind of just jump in, or you can digitally hold up your hand or anything like that. But please, any questions you've got for Jimmy, now's your opportunity.
I'll start if you want. So,
yeah, thanks, Rich.
That's no problem. So I've joined out of interest more than anything else. So just to give you some background to where I work and our history with speech analytics. So I look after voice of the customer at HomeServe. We've been using speech analytics for probably about 6 years, nearly 7 years now. So we're probably one of the longest users of it. And that was really good, Jimmy. So a lot of what you've said rings true. I think especially with companies, when you say it's broken, half true, half not. I would say it's broken because a lot of companies don't know how to use it, and they struggle with how to set it up and how to get value from it. There's many different ways in which you can use speech analytics. Like you've mentioned, you can use it for continuous improvement like we do. You can use it for QA, you can use it for marketing, identifying vulnerability, even down to recently using it to help with the COVID stuff. But I think a lot of companies fail because they try and, solve everything at once, rather than what we did is choose a path and have stuck with it for the last 6 years. So we use it for continuous improvement. And I think the people that use it, like you mentioned, are also absolutely crucial to success. I'll take myself as an example. I have absolutely no real, experience with data manipulation. I'm no SQL, don't know it at all. I would say my skills on Excel are average at best, but what I have is extensive knowledge of voice of the customer. I started on the front line 20 years ago, and what that gave me is an experience with the voice of the customer. And I think interpreting data on speech, so data interpretation and then operationalizing that, is absolutely crucial for the success of speech analytics. To have analysts there that are purely expert and statisticians and, you know, good at manipulating data is not what you want. You want people who can look at the data and then interpret it into a contact center environment and therefore make improvements on the back of it. I won't take up too much more time, but why we've been successful, we use it to improve processes. I know one of your guys, or old guys you used to work with, Craig Metcalf, he's one of our business improvement managers. We basically identify things like reasons for repeat contact, vulnerability, like you've mentioned, areas where emotion and high emotion is stated by the customer. We've built categories to identify that really well, knowledge gaps for the front line, etc., etc. And we use speech analytics to identify these areas of high effort, then use speech and overlay it with our MPS, which is rant and rave, overlay it with operational data, complaints data, and literally we use speech as a driver to tell a story within the operation, which gets the senior leadership teams back up, you know, and we can make decisions on the back of that. It's a really great way of working. It's quite lean, it's quite cyclical the way we operate, and you know, we're making £3 to £4 million a year cost benefit on the back of using speech analytics. And you know, the cost, although it is prohibitive for some, for us it's been you know, it's cost benefit. We're making a lot of money by using it.
I think just on that, Rich, as well. Yeah. So obviously it was a provocative title for the thing, for the overall presentation. I think what I picked up on there though, and what is 100% true, is it's about the mobilization of the insight. And so it's not a beard stroking exercise, and it's not about, again, data scientists being able to improve the accuracy or to do this or to do that. I think it's ultimately it's about putting that insight into the hands of people who are going to take action on it. Absolutely. And you know, and I've had fantastic, you know, you mentioned Craig, like I'll say this to everybody on the call, like, so having worked with Craig and done analytics side by side with him, like it was really, really refreshing to take ideas and to take problems and just to see Craig and people like that, like just run with them and go and like knock down barriers and make improvements, and not always be coming back going, yeah, but we need a bit more of this or we need a bit more of that. You've just, we're here to take action. And, you know, the speech analytics does, you know, a part of that. But then it's about how you engage with it, and I completely agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk to a lot of companies where actually they're failing with speech analytics. They come to see us to see how it's done and done right, and a lot of the problem is that they've not set it up with, you know, in terms of a team. So where it's failed, it will sit within an operations team. You know, you'll have all these experts that are providing all the insight monthly in a management pack, which goes to the SLT. So they know what's going on, but then where does it go? Who deals with it? Who actually takes that insight and operationalizes it and actually does the business improvement? And that's where it fails. You've got all the data, you've got all the insight, you know exactly where your customers are unhappy and which processes are broken, but you've got no business improvement team to pass that information to actually go and do something with it. And that's where a lot of companies just fail, because they can't get the ROI from using speech analytics. They've got the data, but they can't do anything with it. So it's how you set the team up prior to implementation is also very important.
Thanks for that, Rich. Really appreciate that. And it's really interesting to hear how it's home serve, right? How you're doing it at the moment. That's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to touch on vulnerable customers. So for us, I know other people on the call have mentioned it. So what we do is we go out to people's homes and fix their boilers and, you know, if they've got plumbing issues and stuff like that. So vulnerability for us is massively important, especially in winter time where you might have elderly, disabled, vulnerable people actually with no heating, no boilers, and it is a life or death scenario. So we've set it up that, you know, whenever someone calls and they've got a broken boiler and they mention being elderly, disabled, all of that kind of words, it will actually send an alert into an inbox for us to deal with, and we will prioritize and keep a pot of engineers and appointments back for our vulnerable customers. So, you know, we've got a pretty good loop there in terms of how we view vulnerability in our business.
That's great, Rich. Really interesting. I'm going to bring in Simon Bainton on this because Simon and I were talking about this very thing the other day, and Simon had an example that was very, very similar to what you've just said there, Rich. Simon, do you want to just kind of expand on that? And then we've got another question, I think, from one of the attendees.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the work I did for Lufthansa. So so just for background, I was head of cognitive for IBM in travel and transport in Europe about 3 or 4 years ago. And Lufthansa was one of our early customers for using the Watson voice analytics. And it was really interesting what you were saying about getting the transcript right. But rather than using data scientists, we use psychologists. So all of those pauses in speech, all of those little coughs and things, they're all part of the analytics that Watson does as part of that cognitive understanding. And the way we used it was not so much to understand to transcribe the conversation. It was to extract the intent and to extract the sort of state of mind, if you like, of the customer. So we were looking for things like, you know, is this customer angry? Is this customer upset? Is this customer afraid? And we then directed their calls accordingly. We also gave the operator words that they should avoid, words that they should use, tell them that this customer is feeling anxious, tell them this, you know, so you got somebody saying, you know, I'm 18 years old, I'm stuck at Kuala Lumpur airport, my flight's been cancelled, what do I do? And you deal with them very differently to the businessman that says, I'm stuck in the first class lounge and my flight's been delayed by 40 minutes, do something about it, get me an upgrade. You know, and it's understanding the intent. So it wasn't about, I guess what I'm saying is, trying to understand the intent of your customer gives you far more insight into how to deal with them and get a satisfactory outcome. And what it did with Lufthansa from a cost saving point of view was it created a massive increase in customer outcome satisfaction in terms of customer outcome. But it also reduced the time to take to understand the customer's query. Now, you know, understand that it's potentially a little bit more complex. I know about HomeServe because after I left IBM, I was digital director at Cognizant. HomeServe was one of our customers there. But because I think they still run the call center there, I'm not sure. But the key thing was about understanding intent. It was about understanding what, you know, how to deal with that individual customer, and it was about understanding the customer as an individual. What we didn't use in the case of Lufthansa was anything to do with, you know, call analytics or anything like that. It was purely about helping the operator deal with the customer out in front of them, understanding their needs, understanding their frustrations, understanding their vulnerabilities, and helping the call center operator provide a better outcome. And I, you know, just go back to what you said, how much of that kind of cognitive deep learning, I understand what you say about artificial intelligence. I don't call it artificial intelligence. It's artificially cognitive. It's not artificially intelligent. So it can artificially understand intent. It can't artificially understand what to do about it. That's where you need the operator. It'd be interesting your thoughts about that and the use of psychologists in that analytics and using those deep learning patterns. And I guess there the advantage is that, you know, there is one Watson and it learns from every conversation it has with everybody around the world and builds that body of knowledge, which is a slightly different approach, I guess.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So I think if I take the second part, so I'm not at liberty to say like how we do some of the things that we do. but effectively I can call it like a hack, because obviously like IBM Watson gathers so much data. Amazon has got Amazon through Alexa is gathering data all of the time. Google's gathering data all of the time. So how can like a smaller company like build this type of analytics like on its own? It's like quite challenging. So it's so what we had to think of like creative ways to get around that type of thing. And I'm fortunate enough that me and the couple of guys who worked through it, we were able to do that. So I think that's kind of the second point. The first one around psychology is like super important to us. So I think it was a gap in our company. But as some of the guys who have seen that, who may be on the call have seen, we've recently partnered with a company called Cowrie, who are a behavioural science company, and they're enabling us to look at our speech analytics, but not just speech analytics, but things like, you know, how we should be selling to customers, how we should be identifying vulnerability, and taking it out from like out of the data science realm into the behavioural science realm. So Jez Groom has joined as an associate, and Jez, he was at Ogilvy and was doing Nudge for Ogilvy kind of 10 years ago, just when it started to get interesting. I think TMAC has a journey to go when it comes to behavioural science, and we're about 6 weeks into it so far. But I do think that the psychology behind it is very important, and that's where vulnerability, people saying I'm vulnerable or I have a disability, is interesting, but it's actually the ways in which they are saying things, because not everybody will go like I have a disability or I have a problem, and that can be particularly seen with people who have some psychological problems, and I think that's something where I'm particularly keen to understand things like the stress indicators of the voice, or the way in which people who are under stress psychologically rationalise the decisions they're making. So we're very early in that journey, I think, Simon, but that's where we want to get to.
Yeah, one last question on that. One of the things that, I mean, as we developed the platform, and it was I think you mentioned Microsoft, or you may not have mentioned Microsoft. We actually worked with Microsoft on the project. It was a joint IBM Microsoft project with Lufthansa Technik, who are their own internal organisation. And we brought in all that understanding. One of the things we did, you mentioned earlier about scripts, so it was on one of your slides talking about scripts. One of the things we found we were able to do was move, obviously you've got, you have to read people terms and conditions. There are certain things which have to be done, and you can analyse and make sure that's done properly. But what we did was we gradually took away the scripts that we gave the operators and gave them guidance instead of scripts. Yep. And we were able to do that based upon, as you said, analysing vocal tone, analysing the words that people were using, trying to understand their requirements. And rather than, if somebody had phoned for the 15th time, why would you read them all the terms and conditions about booking a ticket when they already knew them, So you could short circuit some of those things. And that again helps you deal with the customer, and actually gave more satisfaction to the operator. It's something that First Direct do a lot, just down the road from me and Leeds. They have that sort of way of guiding the operator rather than giving them a prescribed script to follow. On that subject, have you looked at that? Is that something that you think is a direction to travel to improve call centre outcomes, where you can actually give the operator effectively, more discretion, give them, empower them by giving them guidance as opposed to scripting?
100%. So I think, I'll just say it because I'm the boss, so who's going to fire me? So yeah, we're going to do real-time nudging. So based on what happens on the call, we're going to do real-time nudging of coaching conversations. Like, you're a bit, the first half of this call, you're a bit too loud, maybe tone the voice down. Little coaches, you might want to use these types of words and things like that. And then as it's going through, almost coaching and nudging becomes inbuilt into the agent's day, rather than something that they go off the phone and then have half an hour with the team leader and go, this was wrong, this was wrong, this was wrong. It's more around like empowering them, helping them along the way, nudging them to make the best decisions for themselves and the customer, and then monitoring that like through speech, through AI, and through analytics, so that we've then got the agent's empowered, the customer gets better outcomes, but all of the offline time and things it's low latency. That's kind of where we're going with it.
Excellent. No, really interesting. It's a really interesting field, and you seem to have your finger on the pulse.
Thank you.
Thanks for your questions, Simon. Thanks, Jimmy. I think we've got time for a couple of questions. Anybody else would like to? Yes, Susan. Hi. How are you doing?
Hi. Not too bad. Thanks for that. Was really interesting, Jimmy. So I worked with a team previously who did speech analytics and obviously did the analysis and come up with improvements, etc. And it feels like, you know, that I was just wondering, what is the big thing that's changed in the last 5 years since I was managed that team, and what do you believe over the next 5 years will be the big thing that it'll come out to make it a big difference? Obviously, you've talked about the nudging, you've talked about particular subject areas that need to be explored, like vulnerable customers. But what do you believe is what's been the last big change, and what do you think is the future big change in speech analytics?
Oh, that's a good question. Big change. I think I don't think over the last 5 years, but over the last few years, we've started to see more of an openness for the providers of text analytics to give you the transcripts. So historically, back in the day, you did speech analytics, and speech analytics was a bit of tin. It was like Verint, and you go into Verint or Call Miner or anything, and you'd use it through their interface, kind of thing. And I think where things are changing now is that transcription and speech analytics is going to be, or is being inbuilt into processes. So it's not about a tool that you do something with, but it's like how it gets ingrained into other processes and other decisioning. So I think that's something that's changing, and I think that kind of came along around when there was publicly available APIs for Amazon and Google and IBM Watson. I think that was a bit of a game changer, because in many ways, speech analytics or transcription, the value isn't just the UI that you have, but it's the data, and it's what you can do with that data outside of the UI. So I think that's one change. If I look to the next 5 years, everybody used to think that voice was a dying channel, and everybody would just want to do things via email or web chat. But what we're actually seeing is that there's still demand within the voice channel. People, for certain types of transaction, people still want to speak to a human being, and where you can simplify, you can simplify certain processes and digitize them, there's always going to be some bigger complex things where you're going to need human interaction. And the bigger complex things are the ones where you're more likely to have risks associated with fraud or with vulnerability and things like that. So some of it is around the analytics around that, and I think I've mentioned them to death around the vulnerability and the customer indicators. What I would say is that all of this will be expected in real time, as Simon was mentioning. And secondly, the biggest change that's going to happen, or that will definitely happen, is the cost is going to come right down. So the cost of accessing speech analytics is going to come down. If you look at certain web software now, if you go into Google, you do a Google Hangout, it automatically real-time transcribes what you're saying. I think other providers like Teams and things like that do the same. Yeah. And that just goes to show that the technology companies know how to do this, like for low cost, because you don't pay necessarily for Hangouts, and they're giving you transcription anyway. Yes. So I think the price is gonna come right down. And as I was saying before, like, we've hacked our way to a lower price point, and we know how to do it now. And I think the market will start coming down for it, and it will be, people will be expected to do speech analytics, I think.
And I certainly agree with you that there's no point of having all of that technology and all that wonderful data if you don't actually have the teams in hand who can actually take the information and do something with it. And that, it requires a certain amount of leadership to kind of like, almost like to empower people just to get on and do things and make changes without going through whole heaps of sign-offs, etc. So yes, it's a great tool.
Just on that one, I think, so I completely agree, but it's almost, there's a bit of an inverse as well to that as well, Susan. So what happens is, because speech has been so quite expensive to deploy, it has come from a top level, and then people have been said, you know, we've bought speech for 2 million, like, find me 4 million kind of thing.
Yes.
Where when you lower the price point, you can then do like, you know, skunk works or hacks or little agile pieces of work, which is, you know, how to solve a problem with speech.
Yes.
Without having to go for the full shebang, and then iterate through it. So I think you'll start to see how you can get access to more of these data points in a much more flexible manner. And yeah, so I think the buy-in from a leadership level is super important, but also like having it coming in at such a price point that people can play and be creative with it and think of ways in which you can solve problems.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. I don't know if we've got any more questions. We are just running over time, but that's cool. If anybody wants to ask any more questions, you're more than welcome. I had a question for you, Jimmy, and I may be going a little bit off topic. What's been your most ridiculous purchase during lockdown?
My most ridiculous purchase during lockdown? Oh, there's so many. There's so many. I think, in fact, I think I'm surrounded by ridiculous purchases. I've got a home, well, sorry, so two things. One purchase was, I got a follicle roller to thicken my beard, like this. And then I tried to do it, and it really hurts, so I just throw it in the bin. So that's number one. I live in the centre of Manchester, and because I'm working from home all the time, I've become very, very friendly, overly friendly with my Deliveroo drivers, like, and riders, and they actually know me by name now, and like we have a little chat. And so that'll be the reason why I put on 2 stone in 3 months. So I think that's a bit of a ridiculous purchase. And then just everybody's buying ridiculous stuff. Like, I'm in my daughter's room right now. I've got like just boxes of rubbish. And my daughter, like, I've got these are my headphones. Like, my daughter's put my headphones in like a little case like this. I've got all sorts of rubbish. So yeah. I'm hoping that the lockdown, people have said, oh, I'm in lockdown, I've not really spent that much money. I've just found ways of spending it on ridiculous things.
Yeah. I think I feel your pain there, Jimmy. I'm much the same. Going back to topic though, I just wanted to thank you for your time today. It's been brilliant, really, really interesting stuff. I also want to say congratulations, because you've got 2 kids, but you've got one on the way, haven't you, mate? You've got a bun in the oven, or your better half has a bun in the oven. So congratulations, Jimmy.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
No, and listen, thank you for the presentation. I loved all of the slides. I'm going to pinch a few of those ideas because I do like the images. Listen, if anybody's got any other questions and you want to ask Jimmy offline, We've got a LinkedIn group that you can join. I'll send out a link to it. Or if you've joined through our LinkedIn posts, you'll actually find it. It's ERG Tech and Data Talks. We'll post an update on this talk on there in the next 24 hours. The video for this will be available to watch for 1 week only, and then it won't be available on Zoom, but we might well in the future build up a library of these videos on YouTube. So thank you to everyone. I just want to quickly say next week, we're not sure at the moment. We've got 2 or 3 people that might well be speaking for us. So I can't give you an update yet on who's going to be talking and what the subject matter is, but it will be a belter, whoever it is that's going to be doing it. And I've really enjoyed these events so far. This is our 8th roundtable in 8 weeks. And I think every single presenter we've had has been absolutely top-notch quality. When we do a share, I'm going to tag a few of you in it. If you can like and comment, because we want to build up this and get more people involved. And also, if you want to talk, then please let me know. If there's a subject that you want to hear about, then again, please let me know, and I'll seek out a subject matter expert in our stable or in my network, and we'll get them along to present. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Yeah, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
Well
Jim.
done, Jimmy. Good one. Nice.
Well
Thanks,
done,
Sam, for hosting.
Cheers, Jimmy. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Did we have the recording?